All right, let's jump right into this week's deep dive. Buckle up, because we're going deep into the world of finance and economics.
Should be interesting.
Oh, it definitely is.
Yeah.
We've got Warren Buffett hoarding cash like it's going out of style.
He does seem a bit worried, doesn't he?
He does. And then we've got Elon Musk preaching about fiscal responsibility while SpaceX is basically powered by government contracts.
It's quite the contradiction.
Yeah. And to top it all off, the U.S. Mint's finally saying goodbye to the penny.
Long overdue, if you ask me.
Agreed. But get this, it might actually cost the government more money in the long run. So we'll unpack all of that and more. Ready to dive in?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Okay, first up, let's talk about Buffett. Berkshire Hathaway is sitting on a record $334 billion in cash.
Wow, that's a mind-boggling amount.
It is, right? I mean, that's not just saving for a rainy day. It's more like preparing for a financial hurricane.
Yeah.
What do you think he's seeing that's making him so cautious?
Well, Buffett's known for his long-term outlook. He's not worried about the little ups and downs of the market. He's looking at the big picture. So this cash pile, it could mean he's sensing some serious trouble ahead. Maybe even a recession.
A recession? So you think he's like battening down the hatches and waiting for the storm to pass?
It's possible. We've got inflation eating away at everyone's purchasing power. That war in Ukraine is still causing uncertainty, and interest rates are going up, which makes borrowing more expensive.
So all those things combined, it's like a perfect storm brewing.
Right. And those kinds of conditions, they can really hurt businesses and investors.
That makes sense. But, this could also mean that Buffett sees a big opportunity down the road.
How so?
Well, if the market does crash, he'll be in a prime position to scoop up assets at a discount, right?
Yeah.
With all that cash, he can basically buy whatever he wants.
That's a good point. It's like the saying, be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. He could be setting himself up for a major buying spree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So his caution might actually be a sign of confidence. It's like he's saying, I'm not worried, I'm just being strategic. Which brings us to Elon Musk, who's been pretty vocal about his dislike for government spending.
Right. Always going on about fiscal responsibility.
Yeah, but then you look at SpaceX. They've gotten nearly $20.7 billion in government contracts. And there's potential for them to get even more, like way more, up to $56.4 billion.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that much.
Yeah, it's a lot. So is there a bit of hypocrisy there, preaching against government spending while benefiting from it?
There's definitely some tension between his words and his actions. I mean, let's be real. SpaceX wouldn't even exist without government support.
True. And Tesla got a lot of help from government subsidies and tax breaks, too.
Right. So it seems like he's okay with government help as long as it benefits him.
But on the flip side, some people argue that government support is necessary for innovation, especially in areas like space exploration or electric vehicles, things that are risky and expensive.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Think about the internet. It started with government funding. Same with GKNS and a lot of medical breakthroughs.
So it's not so simple, right? Government spending isn't inherently good or bad. It's more about how it's used.
Exactly. The question is, how can the government support innovation and economic growth without getting too involved in stifling the private sector?
Yeah, that's a tough balance to strike. And it's a conversation that's probably going to become even more important as we navigate these uncertain economic times.
Agreed. I mean, if even someone as experienced as Warren Buffett is playing it safe, maybe we all need to rethink our own financial plans a little bit.
Yeah, that's something to consider for sure. All right, let's take a break from billionaires and government spending and talk about something a little more down to earth. Literally, the penny.
Oh, good riddance.
I know, right? It's about time. The U.S. Mint is finally getting rid of it. It costs more to make a penny than it's worth.
It's true. Plus, nobody even uses them anymore.
I know, I haven't used one in forever. But, and here's the crazy part, getting rid of the penny could actually cost the government more money.
Wait, what? How is that possible?
I know, it sounds weird, right?
Yeah.
It's all because of the nickel. When you get rid of the penny, the nickel becomes the new default for rounding transactions.
Oh, I see.
And nickels are actually more expensive to produce than pennies because they have more metal in them. And with metal prices going up.
It could add up to a lot of extra costs for the government. Wow, that's pretty counterintuitive.
It is. So we're basically just replacing one money-losing coin with another. Makes you wonder if we're headed towards a future without any physical currency at all.
Right. I mean, I barely use cash these days anyway. Almost everything's digital.
Same here. But a completely digital economy, that raises a lot of questions. What about people who aren't comfortable with technology or people who don't have access to the internet?
Yeah, good point. And what about privacy? Will we have any control over our financial data in a cashless world?
These are all things to think about. It's like the death of the penny might seem like a small thing, but it could be a sign of much bigger changes to come.
Definitely something to keep an eye on.
All right, let's shift gears and talk about the global markets. Feels like we're on a bit of a roller coaster ride lately.
It does, doesn't it? It's a lot going on.
Yeah, oil prices are going up, interest rates are making everyone nervous, and then there's all this talk about increased defense spending in Europe.
Definitely a lot to unpack.
Where do you even want to begin with all this?
Well, let's start with oil. Remember those U.S. sanctions on Iranian oil we talked about earlier? Well, they're having a pretty big impact on the global oil market.
In what way?
Well, the price of Brent crude, that's the international benchmark, has jumped up to over $75 a barrel.
Oof, so that means we'll probably be seeing higher gas prices soon?
Yeah, most likely. It's hard to say exactly how much they'll go up because oil prices are so unpredictable.
Yeah, true.
But if this trend continues, it's definitely going to hit people's wallets, especially those who drive a lot for work or have long commutes.
I was afraid you were going to say that. Filling up my tank is already painful enough.
And then there's the Federal Reserve and their whole interest rate dance.
It seems like they're being super cautious about raising rates, which makes sense given everything that's going on.
Yeah, they're walking a tightrope right now.
How so?
Well, they're trying to fight inflation without triggering a recession. If they raise rates too fast, it could really slow down the economy. But if they keep rates too low, inflation might keep getting worse.
So borrowers are basically stuck in the middle of this tug-of-war.
Yeah, pretty much. Higher interest rates mean higher borrowing costs for everyone, so mortgages, car loans, even credit cards will get more expensive.
That's tough, especially for people who are already struggling with the rising cost of everything.
Absolutely. It's a lot for people to handle.
And then you throw in this surge in defense spending in Europe, mainly because of the war in Ukraine. And it's kind of unsettling, to be honest.
Yeah, I understand. It's a big shift in priorities.
What do you think the long-term economic impact of all this military spending will be?
It's hard to say for sure. It really depends on how it's managed. Increased defense spending can create jobs and boost certain industries, which is good.
Right.
But it can also take away resources from other important areas like education, infrastructure, or social programs.
So there are trade-offs to consider.
Exactly. And every country has to decide what their priorities are.
Well, it seems like there's a lot of uncertainty and potential volatility in the markets right now. If even someone like Warren Buffett is taking a cautious approach, what should the average person be doing to navigate all this?
That's the million-dollar question. It's easy to get caught up in all the doom and gloom headlines.
Yeah, I know I do sometimes.
It's important to stay informed, but don't panic. Don't make any rash decisions based on fear.
Easier said than done.
Right. I know. But really, step back, take a breath, and try to look at the bigger picture. Don't just react to the latest news cycle. Try to understand the underlying trends and how they might affect you personally.
Okay, so stay informed, but don't freak out. Got it. What else?
Take a look at your budget. Make sure you have an emergency fund set aside. And if you have any high-interest debt, like credit card debt, focus on paying that down as quickly as possible.
It's like battening down the hatches, getting your financial house in order.
Exactly. It's all about being prepared. And remember, even though it might feel like it right now, storms don't last forever. Economies go through cycles, and this too shall pass. The key is to make smart decisions that align with your long-term goals.
Okay, good advice. Now, before we move on, there's something else happening in Europe that caught my eye. The German election.
Ah, yes. Big changes coming there.
Yeah, the race to replace Angela Merkel is getting pretty intense. One of the leading candidates, Friedrich Merz, has made some interesting statements, to say the least. Well, he said that if he's elected, he'd allow Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to visit Germany without fear of arrest.
That's a bold move.
I know. But isn't Netanyahu facing some international arrest warrants?
He is. So Merz's statement basically suggests that he'd be willing to ignore those warrants for the sake of diplomacy.
Wow. That could cause some serious friction with the international community, couldn't it?
It could. It's a sensitive issue, and Merz's stance has definitely sparked a lot of debate. Some people see it as a pragmatic approach to international relations, while others criticize it as a disregard for international law.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, especially considering Germany's role in the EU. It's a reminder that even political events can have a big impact on the economy.
Absolutely. Political stability is crucial for economic growth. Businesses and investors need to feel confident about the future, and geopolitical uncertainty can create a lot of hesitation.
So it's not just about watching the stock market. It's about understanding the bigger picture, how politics, global events, and economic trends all intersect.
It's all connected. The more we understand about these connections, the better equipped we are to make informed decisions.
That's a lot to take in, but I think it's super important. We've covered so much ground today, from the death of the penny to the surge in oil prices, from Elon Musk's government contracts to the German election.
Yeah, we've been all over the map, literally and figuratively.
But I hope our listeners are starting to see the connections between all these seemingly separate events.
I hope so too. It's all part of this complex, ever-changing global economy we live in.
And while there's definitely some cause for concern out there, I think there are also reasons to be optimistic.
Oh, for sure. It's not all doom and gloom. There are always opportunities to be found, even in challenging times. The key is to stay informed, be adaptable, and don't panic.
Solid advice. Feels like we're constantly being thrown for a loop, right? Like just when you think you've got a handle on things, bam, something else happens.
It's definitely a wild ride, that's for sure. But even with all the uncertainty, there are things we can control, right?
Like what? Give me some hope here.
Well, one thing is diversification. No matter what you're doing, investing, working, even just learning new skills, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Smart. So spread those bets, people.
Exactly. And speaking of spreading bets, we haven't even touched on cryptocurrencies. That's a whole other beast.
Oh man, don't even get me started on crypto. It's exciting, but also kind of terrifying. Like I feel like I need a PhD to understand it.
It is a complex world, but for those who do their homework and are willing to take some risks, it can be a pretty interesting investment.
Just gotta be careful not to bet the farm.
Exactly. Never invest more than you can afford to lose. That's rule number one.
Wise words.
Right.
I think the big takeaway from all of this is preparedness. Whether it's the economy, global events, or even just new technologies, being informed and having a plan is crucial.
Couldn't agree more. It's about protecting yourself financially, but also about being flexible and open to new opportunities.
Like, the world is changing so fast, and if you can't adapt, you'll get left behind.
Exactly. Think about it like this. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today. It's never too late to start preparing for the future.
I love that analogy. It's about taking action, even when things feel uncertain.
Absolutely. We can't control everything that happens, but we can control how we respond and how we prepare.
Well said. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive for today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We talked about everything from the death of the penny to the rise of oil prices, from Elon Musk's government contracts to the German election. It's been a whirlwind.
A whirlwind, but hopefully an informative one.
Yeah, I hope our listeners walked away with some valuable insights that will help them navigate these interesting times.
And if there's one thing to remember, it's that even the most experienced investors, like Warren Buffett, are proceeding with caution right now. So maybe it's a good time for all of us to take a step back, assess our own financial situation, and make sure we're prepared for whatever comes next.
Great advice. So, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged. The world of finance and economics might seem complicated, but it doesn't have to be scary.
Exactly. With a little effort and a healthy dose of skepticism, it can actually be pretty fascinating, even rewarding.
And on that note, I think it's time to sign off. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time.
Keep diving deep, everyone.